At least one person and 13 cattle, sheep and goats have died as an outbreak of anthrax in West Africa threatens countries like Nigeria, Ghana, Togo, and Burkina Faso. These deaths occurred in the Binduri district of Ghana, where human cases stood at 13 2 weeks ago. Since the outbreak, Nigeria's Federal Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Development has warned citizens to desist from eating cow products, especially the skin, popularly called ponmo. In Ghana, the movement of livestock and some pets have been banned in the Upper East region. Consumption of livestock has also been banned there. So before you make a choice of protein today for lunch and maybe dinner, let's have a chat about this outbreak. I am Keminni Amanor, and you're welcome to The Square. Joining our gathering today is Dr. Tuyi Mebawondu. He's a public health physician. Doc, I see you're nodding to my pronunciation of your name. I'm very proud of myself.
You've done very well.
Absolutely. Let's talk about anthrax. How big of a problem is it in Nigeria and then to a large extent the West African region?
Anthrax is a problem somewhere, of course, somehow, somewhere. Those days it used to be a concerning disease, especially as it relates to livestock, and the fact that it's a zoonotic disease. What you mean by zoonotic disease is that it can be usually transmitted from animal to human. Invariably, a case of anthrax is usually picked from an animal, either domesticated or wild animal. But human-to-human transmission is quite difficult. It's not really common. But anthrax naturally is caused by a bacteria called Bacillus anthracis, which dwells naturally inside the soil.
Right.
That's a natural dwelling place. It's just like tetanus, and they dwell naturally in the soil. Now, the bacteria at a point form spores. Spores are something that is a protective casing to help the bacteria survive for a long time. And this bacteria can really survive for a very long time. Okay? Now, when there's ingestion of the germ of this bacteria, either by animal or whatever means, then the spore dissolves, and now the bacteria start multiplying and can cause disease both in animal or human. Mostly in the animal, where it leads to loss of livestock, and of course you understand the importance of having appropriate protein, and the major work of most of Africans is just farming. Where they have to come in contact with soil, come in contact with vegetations and animals. And of course, then the process of slaughtering the animal is not actually, top-notch, where you have to take charge of a lot of things, look at so many things before you slaughter the animal.
So, just clarify for me, before we get to how it presents itself. If it's in the soil, then already our farmers are exposed to it, or does it have to infect an animal before it transfers to
Of course, not if it's in soil, you are exposed to it. If you eat some vegetables that is contaminated with anthrax, you are exposed to it. Okay. Of course, you know that you remember some cases of anthrax attack where they have to put the spore inside a letter sent to people to inhale. And to happen in the US before they stop, before they nip the thing in the bud. So actually, it can be zoonotic. Then it can one can come in contact with it directly.
Okay.
Either through vegetable, through which you eat, through your skin. If you have some skin lesion caused in your skin, and then you're now exposed to the soil, and unfortunately the bacteria is there and then enter the system.
At this point, do we know how it got into Nigeria? Do we know, in fact, how it got into West Africa generally? Do we know how?
The bacteria is naturally occurring in the soil.
Right. So I want to know,
now,
do we know how it began to...
Yes.
The spread began?
Yes. For whatever reason, some of this, you see a high cases, the number of cases you see just, picks up. For whatever, I suspect environmental factors that allow those lot of contacts where people lower their guards, and then, animal picks it, animal died, and then human picks, and human also can die from it. But it's not really a very fatal disease as it is now, because there are 4 types of anthrax. If you want to, if I may expatiate a bit.
Absolutely.
There's a cutaneous one whereby the spore enter a lesion, a cut in the skin. That's a cutaneous anthrax. You will see that in duration. What I mean by duration is that a darkened spot around a blister kind of thing. You may press it, may not even pain, you know, and then the thing will spread, you know, form more spores, go right ahead and, you know, eat quite a certain portion of the skin of the person. There's a long one, which is inhalation. It forms drops in the air and somebody inhales, then it goes to the lung, causes flu-like symptoms, destroys part of the lung. Indeed, that is the most fatal of the anthrax varieties. And there's a intestinal one where somebody eats cabbage or whatever, or leaves or fruits that is contaminated with anthrax, and then you eat, then it causes diarrhea, spread in the system, and cause more diseases and can also lead to death. And then there's injectable ones. In cases where people do a lot of opium injection, we've seen contamination by anthrax, and then they just inject the spore deep into the muscles, where it's called abscess, indurations, big muscle pain, and spread. Of course, the most fatal of them is actually the lungs own, which is common, and that's when you open in the letter and people can actually inhale. So now, let us first of all credit the Ghanaian, you know, agricultural or whoever that first picked it in early. It's nice to pick those diseases early so that you can respond, and the response has been quite impressive there at that level, and we hope the response will equally be impressive here in Nigeria.
We'll talk about the responses, but I want us to also look at, you know, how it presents in animals, so that for people, animal keepers, they would know when their animals are showing that. How does anthrax present itself in animals? Well,
it's similar because essentially most of the animal presentation are actually from ingestion and skin contamination. Okay, when they eat it, of course, the animal become dull. You know, I'm not a vet doctor, but again, the animal becomes dull, and then some of them you see a lot of wound that is actually there with dark center there. Right. The animal becomes dull, and then cannot feed, and then you cannot really play around. So,
are they the same symptoms for humans too?
No, they're quite. For humans, they're quite different, of course.
Okay. What are the symptoms for humans?
For humans, it depends on the type of the anthrax. The skin is the commonest because, you know, when there's a blister in your skin and the spore enters the skin, there will be a damage around that portion of the skin. Right. There will be a dark center. The center will be dark, okay, and then it will spread, causing duration. Sometimes you press, you may not even have that kind of pain. You should see from an injury like that. So you have to have a very high index of suspicion to be able to pick anthrax. But if it occurs in terms of inhalation, the person have cold, fever, you know, and all the sign of flu, then it leads to cough, damage the lungs, lead to pneumonia, spread around the body, and can easily kill. Fatality up to 20%. The disease can occur if the one is exposed to the spot today, between today and even can stay up to months before you see the first sign, up to 2 months before you see the first sign. So that's the way it is. Then the respiratory, the alimentary on the digestive system on the such that once it's taken in, diarrhea, vomiting, sickness. Because what happens is that as the spore enters human, the spores open up, the bacteria start growing and invading tissues, and then most of the reaction you see are a result of tissues and toxins. Toxins, it produces toxins as it's growing in the human body. The toxins then react to the human tissue and cause all the clinical symptoms you're seeing. You see somebody with signs of cold, coughs, catarrh, dry cough, you know, and then it's not going, even despite your regular care, it's not going. You have to be watchful. And then you have to actually, that's why when a doctor is talking, it takes a lot of history. What is your work? Where have you been to? What are you exposed to? So, of course, abattoir people, farmers, you know, military people that need to, you know.
They're at high risk.
They're at high risk. So, these are critical questions that will make you, you know, give you index of suspicion. So
let's look at, you know, management. You earlier mentioned that you're impressed by how Ghanaian authorities have been able to manage the spread as it is right now. What is impressive about what they have done so far, and what is being done here in Nigeria?
Information. You know, the first response to any outbreak like that, you escalate, you inform, you let people know. we've not been using quite a lot of health, what I call health literacy. We've not been using it sufficiently. You know, right ahead, instead of starting killing 13 livestock, instead of 30 and one human being, people are saying that we have found out that anthrax is the cause. Because when you look at a cohort, a group of people, and you are finding death increasing in them, you need to seek and ask questions before the thing spread to. And then besides, if that information got to Nigeria, Nigeria said, guys, vaccinate your livestock against anthrax. You know, it's very cheap. It's available in various institutes in VOM, in Jos. Take it, vaccinate. But again, it's not just ponmo, and I just this assault against ponmo is just quite interesting. It's not just ponmo alone. Quite a lot of animals, even vegetables we take, you can pick anthrax from them. It's not just about besides.
But won't the bacteria die once we cook the meat?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. When you heat, you know, the kind of temperature we use to prepare ponmo will actually make the anthrax, you know, ineffective in a way. So it's not ponmo, it's the handling. When you have injury, you know, the handling of meat and meat products and farm produce. These are the critical things they should actually be discussing with. I expect that for them to actually be able to talk to them about preventive measures. It's not just vaccination alone, because if you wear gloves that is not broken, if you wear rain boots that is not broken, there are classical things you should wear, you know, handling things in the farm. Those things will not be able to enter your skin, for instance. You know, if you're suspicious and you're having a lot of dust while you're doing your work, you put on, there's a mask that you can use. And then the agric people should be able to cooperate, you know, interact with even the medical people, the public health people, to look at what should be the appropriate response. If you have sufficient vaccine, that is nice. Then the second thing is that you should be able to spread information on common symptoms that will distinguish anthrax in a particular population cohorts. You need to be able to spread that information. And thirdly, you must be able to actually stimulate certain centers to respond. Should somebody comes with disseminated anthrax diseases and that is so pervading that can kill, then you need to say, okay, this is where you go to and get treatment. So that sync, that collaboration, and then we should not be waiting for, you know, when an outbreak happens in the near country, then we're now acting as if we're a super person. But again, information is the starting, because that's the cheapest thing.
Right.
That's the cheapest thing. Interestingly, there's still antibiotics that can deal with anthrax, and it's not really too expensive antibiotics. Right. But you must know that you're having anthrax.
You must know that you have it. We'll get a bit more to that. But you mentioned handling. And in handling, it would also come to the consumer, because it's not just, you know, those who are producing the food and the livestock, but you going to buy the fresh meat. You should also be careful about doing that. How do we protect ourselves in that area?
The standard is this. Okay, you are in the market. They weigh your meat for you and all that stuff. Because normally, until now, let me talk about Lagos State, when the law was made to specify transportation, handling and transportation of animal products. It used to be somebody hawking this thing inside the market, by local market and all those things. I'll be wondering, this is what we are supposed to eat. You see some of them lying by the roadside where dust is being aroused any time, and then it's testing all the thing and then they give to somebody. Ordinarily, when the food gets to you, you know, and I'm sure most women have that glove they use in the kitchen. You wear the glove. The first thing is to pour water, you know, warm water, hot water, and clean the meat properly. Okay. The preparation, food, because all these things boils down to basic things, you know, hygiene, personal hygiene, environmental cleanliness, and, you know, high index of suspicion. Those things are not expensive. They're not really expensive. For me to wash my hand is not expensive. For me to clean my environment is not really expensive, especially when you're preparing food. So we should be able to educate and tell those people, especially those who are preparing food by the roadside where we have to go and buy, the importance of maintaining that little environment and handling of the meat which they're going to cook. So that is where we need to respond. And then specifically the people at risk. Who are the people at risk? Of course, we know the border towns. Secondly, we know the kind of work that can easily pick. You know, nobody can come to this studio and be looking for anthrax. You know, you have to go to the farm. You have to go to those people that do a lot of
high-risk areas.
Yeah.
Okay.
The farmers.
So then my other question is, when we boil the meat, we stand a chance of killing the bacteria. So for some farmers who will be considering the loss that comes with burying infected livestock, they will now say, okay, then let's just cut it up and take it to the market. What's your advice for people who may be thinking that way?
Now, there should be a standard. You know why standard is important in life? There's always a limit. Nature sets limits for all of us, from here to here. You understand? Your breeding rate is from this rate to this rate. Human height is from this to this. There's a limit. You can be this or that. But again, in all what nature is teaching us, in my own understanding, is that, set limit, set standard. The other word for limit is standard. Set standard and look at the standardize the handling process. Don't make it cumbersome. Don't make it punitive. Set those things, and then when you set those standards, try to mainstream and teach, because they are cooperatives. Okay? If you're talking about cow herders, they are cooperative. If you're talking about goat herders, they are cooperative. If you're talking about poultry handlers, they are cooperative. They are standard, which you have to tell them that this is what is teachable. Of course, you are telling me now that there's no job for people. But there are a lot of jobs in agro business that you can tell people that, listen, you know what? You're a supervisor to ensure this standard
but when your cattle is infected, don't bring it to the market.
Of course. How would they know that the cattle is infected? Without somebody confirming that the cattle is infected?
That's a good
point. And then the simple thing is that nobody wants to...
Shouldn't the extension officers be doing that?
Oh, how many do they have to go around the country? So, and I'm sure, at the market level, at least at the point of market, which should be some distance from the main slaughter place, I'm sure there are people that will examine the animal and look for any sign of disease. During the examination of the animal, you put on your mask, you put on everything, and you look very well, and be sure that the animal is not having a disease that can transmit to human beings. Not just anthrax, even bovine tuberculosis, can move from animal. A lot of big number of zoonotic diseases that can move from animal to human. So for us, high index of suspicion, follow through personal hygiene, and then in preparation of your meat, especially in preparation of your meat and vegetables.
Indeed. One of the things that the Ghanaian authorities have done is to ban the movement of livestock and even the sale of it. Would it be something you'd expect the region to look into doing, perhaps banning the movement? Because we have our herders also to think about.
I think, you see, sometimes we just throw, what we call fire, like fire extinguisher approach. We just, put up this. That's not the basics, The basics, if you ban, the spore will stay in the ground, okay? So what are you going to do about it, okay? So the point is that teach these people clearly, the preventive methods. If you have to do vaccination for those animals, do the vaccination.
Are these vaccines available?
It's cheap now. Anthrax vaccine is there. Okay. If you have to actually, teach those herders, this is your clothing. This is the best way to teach them. Okay. So because at the end of the day, this thing will be self-limited to go away. But don't punish them. Don't hit the economy. Don't delay, the protein provision, because you cannot control anthrax. I don't. So it's just like, when somebody wake up, I feel that there's too much money in Nigeria, circulating in Nigeria, and punish all of us and seize all our money. So that's not a response. You shouldn't just say, animal, don't move, or this thing, don't move. But normally, if you can quickly, at the settlement of those herders, identify and vaccinate those things, identify those ones that are having the disease and kill and bury, and then compensate them. Because this is thing about, that's what they use as a source of living. You cannot grab the animal, kill, and then say, it's your problem now. You must look for a way to say, listen, for us killing this animal, take this, and then we bury it so that you won't have reason to go and exhume and start eating again.
Right.
So it has to be an encompassing thing, and then it's not, governments tend to think, all over Africa, we tend to think that we know better than the local people. These are critical stakeholders in looking at how to respond to an outbreak like that, how to respond, because it's not just about animals, it's not just about health, it's a whole lot of things. Climate changes, environment is throwing up a lot of germs that are actually stay in their natural habitat, and their, exploration, what do you call it, with the removal of the spore, where the soil now grows and become real bacteria, is happening because of the climate change and some other threatening conditions. Okay, so agri, environment, labor people, you know, and nutrition people should actually work together as a committee and look at the whole spectrum of controlling outbreak of diseases, you know, from animal to human.
I want us to take a break. When we come back, we'll look at, you know, a few management issues. We'll also discuss what are other animals this could infect, because you say it's in the soil. Once the spore is broken, the bacteria is activated. And we know that poultry eats from the soil. So what are we looking at here? Stay with us. We'll be right back. Well, thanks for staying with us here on The Square. I hope you're learning a thing or two about the current anthrax outbreak in some countries in West Africa. Still with me here is Dr. Tuyi Mebawondu, and he's been sharing some knowledge with us as far as this disease is concerned. Doc, thank you so much for your patience. I just think that we'll talk a bit more about the management issues, but let's look at it this way. Are there limitations as to what authorities could do for these farmers, these agric workers, these livestock keepers?
Why should there be limitations? Because you know that when epidemic breaks, invariably, it's a jumping from the wild or domesticated or wild animal to human. We all know that. Whether it's COVID, whether it's cholera, it's jumping from one animal to human, whether it's yellow fever. So we know the importance of that ecosystem. Right. You know, that the ecosystem, the climate, our forestry law, okay, handling of animals, handling of our soil, is related to our health. Of course, the new concept is what we call planetary health now, where we see the whole planet, you know, the whole planetary ecosystem, you know, affecting health, whether you like it or not, including your mood. So now, they shouldn't have help, they can't claim helplessness. This has been established and known. And of course, the best thing to build is to actually build a surveillance system, okay? It's not just from Ghana alone, not just from Nigeria or Kenya, but it should be African-wide surveillance system. We can't be accounting for more than 90% of diseases in the world and not be able to produce 5% of the human resources to deal with them, okay? It's a sad song. You know, the regional, African Regional Center of WHO now, we're not doing much because, again, people are not putting money into it, okay, to do a lot of things. So what it means is that we should be able to standardize our forestry practice. We should be able to standardize our animal husbandry. We should be able to know that as long as human beings are interacting with animals, either at home or in the wild, germs can jump to them and then be spread by human to human. So I don't really see what is difficult in that. But, you know, like, if we can reduce our greed for a little bit, a lot of things will be done in Africa.
What greed?
No, wait.
I didn't see that coming.
Don't worry. If we can, a lot, because you know what? It's like everybody's looking at, okay, wait a minute. What is in it for me? WIIFM, that's the radio station they are listening to, WIIFM. What is in it for me? It has to do with pecuniary money. So, wait a minute, we have a forestry law. We have a Greek law. We have things that has to do with proper handling of animal. We call all the stakeholders so that look what, these things can happen. This is how to identify this. This is what you should do. This is the number to call. This is the center to go to. If you lose your animal, we're going to compensate you. Because people want to hear about that.
And as said now, we don't know that
yes.
here.
If people, you understand, people want to hear that if I'm losing this because I'm sacrificing so that human beings won't get infection, then where's my money? I've spent money to nurture this animal. I've roamed around with the animal. Why should I have loss without you compensating me? So that is clearly there. Secondly, you know, it has to be, you know, environmentalists, forestry, agri, medical people interacting in a way to help the surveillance. And surveillance must be built, must be robust, must be agile, must be quite responsive. Because the major thing is for us to, you know, to detect, you know, before the disease break.
Indeed. I'll come back to you, but we did promise our viewers a second conversation. Unfortunately, technology is not on our side today, but let's try if we can take you to Cameroon now. Aga Indi Inwi Fru is a public affairs analyst. She is based in Cameroon. She's joining us on the death of the preeminent political figure, Ni John Fru Indi. Aga, can you hear us? Well, as I said before, the connection to Aga it's very horrible, and unfortunately we are unable to bring you that conversation. But we'll continue learning more about anthrax here in the studio, and then perhaps tomorrow we'll bring you that conversation on the Cameroonian opposition leader who's died. Doc, for me, it's a lot of eye-opening, because I didn't even know it could affect vegetables, particularly because it's already in the soil. In the soil, yes. And we don't cook our vegetables. What should we do at this point? Are there ways we can handle the vegetables so that we can mitigate the exposure that comes from that? You know, when I go to the market, I get the fresh vegetables, I take them home. What can I do to it so that I can mitigate my exposure to the bacteria?
Yeah, the simple thing is actually to do a thorough washing while it's still fresh. Unfortunately, there's no water, and the water is, or the source of water is not that clean. Access to water is another issue. It's a huge discussion, you know, so that you don't also pick a waterborne diseases. So the thing you do is that, you know, I know that the market condition where they're selling vegetables could be quite challenging. Dirt everywhere, you know, except you have to go to the supermarket where those things are a bit expensive. And then those people are not even taught how to handle those vegetables properly. So if you have to go there, the first thing, you know, because washing does a lot of good to everything we consume. So run water over it, wash it thoroughly, properly, wash. So we see repeated washing. We drop a lot of those of the spores away, and unfortunately, you see taste of vegetable and you can feel the sand in it, which is quite
bad.
So before the cooking, so the key thing for this epidemic is to spot and stop before
spot and stop. Indeed.
It's a spot and stop.
You know, another thing we have spoken about are the symptoms. Someone might be watching and will think, oh, maybe I have anthrax because of their own, you know, their own exposures or whatever the case is. Such a person would want to go to the hospital, which is the wisest thing to do. If you suspect that you may be exposed to the bacteria, go to the hospital. But if they go to the hospital, have we activated any system that would look at people suspected of anthrax, should that be the case if it's not there?
Now, what I would say is this, because anthrax, what we call differential diagnosis in medicine, when some sickness resemble themselves and then actually that's something. So that's a lot of differential diagnosis, whether the ulcer, whether the skin own, whether the respiratory own, or even the gastrointestinal own. It has a lot of differentials, you know, that you think that it could be this, or is it a diarrhea disease, is it gastroenteritis, is it, you know, is it having flu, is it just bacterial pneumonia, simple bacterial pneumonia? Of course, the danger is in persistent self-medication, when somebody feels that, you know what, I should know, when I had cough the last time they gave me this, let me go and buy that. So that's the first danger. The second danger is that if you're not getting response enough and you have challenges in human resources at the center you went to, and then you have to wait and then get angry and leave. That's the second thing. But what is cheap, what can be done is what we're doing. You come, you discuss, you alert people. But interestingly, the attention to health information is quite limited. We have this perception, I'm being protected, God is my healer, okay? Nice, God is your healer. But attention, detailed attention to what health is, we are neglecting it every time. So whatever it takes, we need to treat soil with much of respect. Open defecation is a disaster that can even send an anthrax that is inside the intestine back to the soil.
Back to the soil.
Okay, and send a lot of disease that is germs inside the intestine back to the soil to carbonate. Okay, so you need to do that. You need to dispose your waste properly. You need to cleanse everything. So now, if you have any suspicion of early illness, that's why even when drug is being advertised on television or radio station, they tell you after a few days, you don't get well, see a doctor. So, of course, this one, with this signaling now, what we're saying, is going to raise people's suspicion. Okay, if you see an ulcer, say, oh, could this be Anthrax? Could this be a Burkina ulcer? Is it just another ulcer? If somebody is coughing and having no suspicion, wait a minute, could this be COVID? Could this be Anthrax? So that's what happens. So the outbreak helps to raise awareness.
Right. Would you expect health professionals to be extra cautious as far as their protective?
They know. They should know what to do.
They should know.
There's what we call universal protection. You know, there's a protocol, a thorough protocol on what you should do to anybody, because somebody should not come to the hospital and give the health worker disease. You should not also give them disease. It's both ways. A health worker can have disease that can be transmitted to another person, or the person can have disease that can be transmitted to a health worker. So there must be a barrier interaction, and the barrier is simple: your face mask, your apron, your gloves. My
curiosity was also piqued when you said this comes from the soil and even affects vegetables.
Even poultry.
Yes,
even
I was going to say that.
Yes, even poultry. So we shouldn't be focusing on what's it called, cattle and ponmo alone.
Okay.
Even poultry, because the contamination.
It's in the soil.
It's in the soil.
It's in the soil.
It's in the soil. So it's just like contamination of tetanus. It's in the soil. It's not commonly jumped from another person. It's in the soil.
So finally, some people would want a more direct answer to whether or not to continue to consume animal products. What would you say, finally? Should we continue to eat ponmo?
Indeed, what you need to do is actually, your measures, preventive measures, handling of those animal products.
And we just buy.
When you take to your kitchen now, when you take to your kitchen, just go through the process of proper preparation. Wear those your gloves you used to wear, call this in boiled water, wash everything properly, and then.
How about cooked food? When we go to the roadside, go to the restaurants, should we consume animal products from them?
What are you going to do if you don't consume animal products? What are you going to do? We know we have a precarious situation where we have how many malnourished, as much as
I know we have to go,
45 million malnourished children. What are you going to feed them?
We know that this is something that comes up every now and then. So how long should we expect this outbreak to last, based on the history that we know of?
Now, I'm sure in a month it will likely go away, because we started early by signaling, by talking about it, by taking preventive measures. The thing will just go off. Really.
Doc, thank you so much for your education on the subject matter.
Thanks for having me.
Doc Tuyi Mebawondu is a public health physician who's been educating us about anthrax. Now the decision is in your hands. Remember that the discussion we've had is not a replacement for medical advice. If you feel you've been exposed to the bacteria, the best place to go is to go to a clinic or a hospital and have you checked out. But also remember that he said, while you can eat your meat, you should make sure and trust the source it's coming from. Make sure it's properly handled. I hope you've learned a thing or two. If you missed it, it's always on YouTube. News Central is the key words to look out for there, and watch a playback of our show today. I'll see you same time tomorrow. Perhaps we'll bring you the conversation on John Fru.